All right, let's talk about one of the most powerful and maybe one of the most misunderstood tools in all of project management, the work breakdown structure, or WBS. It's kind of like the secret sauce that separates a project that flows smoothly from one that's just pure chaos. And we're about to find out exactly why.
But here's the thing. To really get why the WBS is so important for success, we actually have to start by looking at the opposite. We need to dissect the anatomy of failure, because that's where the real power of this tool just becomes crystal clear.
So let's ask the big question, right? We've all seen it. We've probably all been a part of it. Projects that just spiral out of control, they blow the budget, they miss every deadline, or they just completely fall apart. Why? What is the common thread running through so many failed projects?
Well, what's really fascinating is when you start looking at the usual suspects. Things like poorly defined tasks, total confusion over who's supposed to be doing what, estimates that were basically just wishful thinking, and crucial connections between tasks that nobody saw. And when you trace all of these problems back to their source, you almost always find one single glaring weakness: a bad or completely missing work breakdown structure.
Okay, so if a missing WBS is the root of all that chaos, it stands to reason that a strong one is the source of order. This is where we introduce the idea of the project blueprint. I want you to stop thinking of the WBS as just some chart and start seeing it as the actual architectural foundation for a predictable, well-run project.
All right, let's get the official, kind of textbooky definition out of the way. Yeah, it sounds a little dense, I know, but there are a few magic words in here. Deliverable-oriented, which just means it's focused on the what, not the how. Hierarchical, meaning it's got levels, like a family tree. And decomposition, which is just a fancy way of saying breaking things down.
But you know what? Let's just simplify that. The absolute best way to think about a WBS is right here. It's the engineering blueprint for your project. Period. Think about it. A builder would never, ever start pouring concrete without a detailed blueprint. So why should a project manager start a project without one? This is what turns your big ideas into a clear, visual plan of attack. So what's it really doing for you? Well, its core job is to translate that high-level scope into actual, tangible work. It's your ultimate checklist to make sure everything that needs to get done is identified. No missing pieces and no doing the same work twice. This thing becomes the bedrock for all your other planning, and maybe most importantly, it makes it super clear who owns what.
Now, if you remember only one thing, and I mean one single thing, from this entire explainer about creating a WBS, I want it to be this number: 100%. This is everything.
It's called the 100% rule, and it is the absolute guiding principle of every single good WBS. It's not a suggestion, it's not a nice to have, it's non-negotiable, and it's exactly what gives the WBS all its power. So what does 100% of the work actually mean in practice? It means your WBS has to capture all the work defined in the project scope. That includes the obvious technical stuff, sure, but also the project management effort itself, the documentation, the testing, the user training, all of it. The rule is simple, and it's beautiful. Nothing extra gets in, and absolutely nothing gets left out.
Now, a question I get all the time is, hey, isn't this just a fancy to-do list? And the answer is a hard no. They're totally different animals. A WBS is all about the deliverables, the what, and it's got that hierarchical structure. A simple task list, on the other hand, is about the day-to-day activities, the how, and it's usually just a flat list. The WBS defines the entire playground. The task list is just playing the game inside it.
Okay, so we know what it is, we know why it's so important, but how do you actually sit down and build one? Let's walk through the process. It's actually a lot more straightforward than you might think. The whole game really comes down to this one core concept: decomposition. And again, don't let the fancy word fool you. All it means is taking a big, scary, complex goal and breaking it down and down and down into smaller, more manageable, and way less intimidating pieces. And here's the playbook. You start at the very top with the final big picture deliverable. Then you break that down into its major chunks or phases. Then you take each of those chunks and break them down further. You keep going until you hit a level we call work packages. Once you think you're done, you apply that 100% rule to make sure it's all there. And finally, you get it in front of your team and stakeholders to make sure it makes sense to everyone. So I mentioned that term, work package. What is that? Well, that's your stopping point.
That's the lowest level you go in your WBS. A work package is a chunk of work that's small enough that you can easily wrap your head around it. You can plan it, you can put a cost estimate on it, you can schedule it, you can assign it to a person or a team, and you can track it. It's the fundamental building block of your entire project plan.
Oh, and a quick but super important pro tip, don't forget the WBS dictionary. See, the chart itself is just the visual skeleton. The dictionary is the companion document that adds all the meat to the bones. It's where you describe each work package in detail, like who owns it, what the deadline is, what done looks like. It's absolutely crucial.
So you've built your blueprint. You're done, right? Not even close. Because a great WBS doesn't just sit on a shelf. It makes this beautiful transition from a planning tool into your most powerful control tool for the entire life of the project.
In fact, a really strong WBS is the foundation for, well, pretty much every other critical thing you need to do to manage your project effectively. Let's see how that works.
First up, schedules. This is just common sense, right? You cannot possibly figure out when the work is going to get done until you have clearly and completely defined what all the work is. The WBS provides that essential what. Next, let's talk about money. You want a reliable budget? It all starts here. Real project costs aren't just guesses pulled from thin air. They're built from the bottom up. You estimate the cost for each little work package, and then you roll it all up. Without a WBS, your budget is just a guess. With one, it's an estimate.
And what about risk? Well, when you can see every single component of the project laid out clearly, it becomes infinitely easier to spot where things might go wrong. You can identify risks tied to specific work packages, assign someone to own that risk, and come up with a real plan to deal with it.
And this quote, man, it just says it all. Having strong WBS discipline isn't just about drawing a nice-looking chart. It is the fundamental practice that separates the predictable, high-performing projects from those chaotic, stressful ones that are always late and always over budget.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. When you look at your own projects, what do you see? Do you have a real, solid blueprint, or are you just trying to build something without one? Is your project's blueprint actually built to last?